The waiter's fake smile couldn't mask his pity as he refilled my wine glass for the third time. Here I was, Eli Morrison, 43 years old, sitting across from my wife of 18 years at Romano's, the fanciest restaurant our dying New England town had to offer, watching Marina text someone under the table while I tried to salvage what was left of our anniversary dinner. "The salmon's good," I said, cutting into the overpriced fish that tasted like cardboard soaked in butter. Marina didn't look up from her phone. Her perfectly manicured fingers, nails painted that shade of red that screamed, "I'm too important for this conversation," danced across the screen. She'd spent 2 hours getting ready, emerging from our bedroom in a black dress that cost more than my monthly car payment, looking absolutely stunning and completely uninterested in being here with me. "Marina." I reached across the table and gently touched her wrist. "It's our anniversary." She finally looked up, those green eyes that once made my heart skip now cold as January in Maine. "Right. Anniversary. 18 years of—" She gestured vaguely at me, then around the restaurant. "This." The contempt in her voice hit me like a physical blow, but I'd gotten good at hiding it. Instead, I smiled and reached into my jacket pocket. "I made you something." Her expression shifted to barely concealed annoyance as I pulled out a small wooden box. I'd spent weeks in my garage workshop, staying up late after my shifts at the auto restoration shop, carving intricate roses into the mahogany lid. Inside, nestled in velvet I'd carefully selected to match her favorite earrings, lay a silver locket with our wedding photo. "It opens," I said softly, demonstrating the tiny clasp. "I thought you could put a new picture inside. Maybe one of us and Jess from last Christmas." Marina picked up the box like it might contain a dead rat. She examined it with the same expression she reserved for the clearance rack at department stores, polite disgust mixed with social obligation. "Wood," she said flatly. "Mahogany. I hand-carved every—" "Eli." She set the box down without opening the locket. "We need to talk." The restaurant suddenly felt too warm. The couple at the next table was arguing about their mortgage. The elderly man by the window was eating alone, reading a newspaper. Normal people living normal lives while mine was apparently about to implode. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk." Marina's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and something changed in her face. A flush crept up her neck. She looked toward the restaurant entrance, then back at me. "I've been seeing someone," she said. The words hung in the air like smoke. I heard them, understood them intellectually, but they didn't seem to connect to anything real. This was our anniversary dinner. We'd been together since college. We had a daughter. We had a mortgage and joint bank accounts and 18 years of shared history. "Seeing someone," I repeated. "Travis Kellerman. You know him. He sold the Hendersons their house last year. He's—" She paused, searching for words. "He's everything you're not." Before I could respond, before I could even process what she'd just said, the restaurant door opened and in walked Travis Kellerman himself. 32 years old, 6'2", wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. His blonde hair was perfectly styled, his smile was magazine perfect, and he was walking directly toward our table. Marina stood up. Actually stood up, smoothing her dress and checking her reflection in the window. "Perfect timing," she said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Travis approached with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. He nodded at me like I was a piece of furniture, then put his arm around my wife's waist. "Ready to go, beautiful?" he asked Marina. She leaned into him, right there in front of me, in front of everyone. "Absolutely." I found my voice. "Marina, what the hell?" She turned to face me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married. Then it was gone, replaced by something cold and final. "Yes, I slept with him," she said clearly, projecting her voice like she was on stage. "I've been sleeping with him for 6 months. And I regret absolutely nothing." The restaurant went dead silent. Even the kitchen sounds stopped. I could feel every eye in the place on us, could practically hear phones coming out to record this disaster. Travis squeezed Marina's hand. "Come on, babe. Let's get out of here." They walked away together, leaving me sitting there with 2 dinner plates, 1 untouched dessert menu, and a handmade anniversary gift that suddenly felt heavier than lead in my hands. The waiter appeared at my elbow, his fake smile replaced by genuine sympathy. "Sir? Is there anything you need?" I looked around the restaurant. The other diners were trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed my public humiliation, but their whispers filled the air. Tomorrow, everyone in town would know. My co-workers, my neighbors, my daughter's teachers, everyone would know that Eli Morrison's wife had walked out on him on their anniversary for a younger, richer man. "Just the check," I said. But as I reached for my wallet, I felt something else in my jacket pocket. A small USB drive I'd placed there weeks ago, insurance I'd hoped I'd never need. I pulled it out, turning the tiny device over in my fingers. "Actually," I said to the waiter, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "Excellent. Tomorrow's delivery will be quite the shock." A moment I've been planning for ages. The waiter looked confused, but I was already standing, dropping cash on the table and pocketing the wooden box Marina had rejected. As I walked toward the exit, passing the table where she'd destroyed our marriage, I allowed myself one small smile. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd broken me. She had no idea what was coming. The drive home took me through the center of our town, Millbrook, Massachusetts, population 12,000 and shrinking. Once upon a time, this place had been something. The old textile mill still stood by the river, converted now into overpriced loft apartments that nobody could afford. Main Street was half-empty storefronts and half-gentrified coffee shops that served $5 lattes to people who commuted to Boston. I'd lived here my whole life. Graduated from Millbrook High, married my high school sweetheart, bought a modest colonial on Elm Street, where we raised our daughter. I knew every pothole, every shortcut, every neighbor's dog. This town was supposed to be my anchor, my foundation. Now it felt like a fishbowl, and I was the main attraction. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I left Romano's. Text messages, missed calls, Facebook notifications. Word traveled fast in a small town, and Marina's public declaration had apparently already made the rounds. I didn't need to check the messages to know what they said. Sympathy mixed with gossip, concern laced with curiosity about the juicy details. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house Marina and I had called home for 15 years. The porch light was on. I'd installed that motion sensor last spring when Marina complained about coming home to a dark house. The flower beds were perfectly maintained. I'd spent every weekend for the past month getting them ready for summer. Everything looked normal, peaceful, like a family lived here. The front door opened before I reached it. Jess stood in the doorway, 18 years old, and looking exactly like her mother had at that age. Same green eyes, same auburn hair, same ability to cut me down with a single look. "Really, Dad?" she said. "Really?" I stopped on the porch steps. "Jess." Emma's mom already called. She saw the whole thing. Said Mom walked out with some guy and left you sitting there like a pathetic loser. The words hit harder coming from my daughter than they had from Marina. At least my wife had been angry, passionate. Jess just sounded disgusted. "It's complicated, sweetheart." "Don't." She held up her hand. "Just don't." Mom told me this was coming. She said you'd try to make her look like the bad guy, but I saw this whole thing falling apart. The way you two barely talked anymore. The way you'd just sit in that stupid garage all night instead of trying to fix anything. I climbed the steps slowly, each one feeling like a mountain. "Your mother and I have been having problems, but I never thought—" "You never thought because you never paid attention," Jess snapped. "Mom's been miserable for years." "Years, Dad." And you just kept pretending everything was fine, making your little wooden boxes and fixing old cars like that was going to solve anything. She stepped aside to let me into my own house, but her body language made it clear I wasn't welcome. The living room looked the same as always. Marina's taste in furniture, her carefully arranged decorations, her magazines fanned out on the coffee table. But it felt different now, like a stage set for a play that had already ended. "Where is she?" I asked. "Gone. She packed a bag while you were at dinner. Said she'd be back for the rest of her stuff tomorrow." I sank into my recliner, the one piece of furniture in the house that was truly mine. Jess remained standing, arms crossed, looking down at me with a mixture of pity and anger that reminded me painfully of her mother. "The guy she's with," I said. "Travis. Did you know about him?" Jess's expression flickered for just a moment. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "She's happy, Dad. Happier than I've seen her in forever. He takes her places, buys her things, treats her like she's special instead of just..." There. Each word was a knife, precisely placed and expertly twisted. But underneath Jess's anger, I could hear something else. Uncertainty, maybe. Or guilt. "And you think that's okay?" I asked. "You think it's okay that she cheated on me, humiliated me in public, destroyed our family for some real estate agent with good hair?" "I think," Jess said slowly, "that you drove her away. And now you're going to sit here feeling sorry for yourself instead of figuring out how to fix your life." She turned to go, then paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Oh, and Dad? I'm staying at Emma's tonight, and probably tomorrow night too. I can't deal with your pity party right now." I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the slam of her bedroom door. A few minutes later, she was back downstairs with an overnight bag, walking past me like I was invisible. The front door closed, and I was alone in the house for the first time in 18 years. I sat there for a while, listening to the silence. The refrigerator hummed. The old heating system made settling noises. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's dog barking at something in the yard. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a normal house. But nothing about this was normal anymore. I got up and walked through the house, taking inventory of my new reality. In the kitchen, Marina had left a note on the counter. "Eli, I'll be back tomorrow afternoon for my things. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. M." Not love Marina or sorry Marina or even just Marina. Just M, like she was signing a business memo. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then immediately retrieved it and smoothed it out. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked at it. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and God knows how many social media notifications. I scrolled through a few of the texts. "Dude, just heard. You okay? Sam, Eli, I'm so sorry. Call me if you need anything. Beth. Holy shit, man, saw the video on Facebook. Marina's lost her mind. Rick video. There was a video. I opened Facebook with trembling fingers, and there it was, posted by someone I didn't even recognize. Shaky phone footage of Marina standing up at our table, declaring her affair for the whole world to hear. The video had been posted an hour ago and already had 47 shares and 93 comments. I scrolled through the comments, each one a fresh humiliation. Always thought she was too good for him. Poor guy. Never saw it coming. Travis Kellerman? Lucky bastard. This is what happens when you let yourself go. Look at him just sitting there. I closed the app and threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the screen cracking in a spiderweb pattern. Perfect. Now I was alone, humiliated, and had a broken phone. I walked through the living room, past the family photos that now looked like evidence of a lie, and opened the door to the garage. This was my space, my sanctuary. The smell of sawdust and motor oil, the familiar weight of tools in my hands, the satisfaction of fixing things that were broken. Except I couldn't fix this. My current project sat on the workbench, a 1967 Mustang convertible that I'd been restoring for the past 2 years. Marina had complained about the money I spent on parts, the time I spent out here, the noise I made on weekend mornings. But this car was going to be beautiful when I finished it. Classic, powerful, valuable. Unlike me, apparently. I walked to the back corner of the garage, where I kept an old filing cabinet behind a stack of paint cans. The bottom drawer was locked, but I had the key on my keychain. Inside were documents I'd hoped I'd never need: bank statements, phone records, photographs, and a burner phone I'd bought 3 months ago when I first started suspecting Marina's affair. I'd hired a private investigator, a guy named Danny who used to be a cop before he got caught taking bribes. Danny wasn't much to look at, but he was thorough, and he was discreet. The file he'd given me last week was comprehensive. Dates, times, locations, photographs of Marina and Travis together. I'd planned to confront Marina privately, maybe suggest marriage counseling, try to save our family. I'd never imagined she'd blow everything up so spectacularly in public. But now that she had, I had options. I picked up the burner phone and scrolled through the contacts. Danny's number was there, along with a few others, people who owed me favors, people who had information, people who could help me even the score. I selected a number and hit call. Danny? It's Eli Morrison. Yeah, I know it's late. Listen, remember that package we discussed? The one with all the documentation about my wife's extracurricular activities? It's time to deliver it. I listened to his response, then smiled for the first time all evening. Tomorrow morning, Travis Kellerman's office, his home address, and every major real estate broker in the county. Make sure they all get copies of everything, the photos, the financial records, the whole story. And Danny, make sure his boss at Century 21 gets a special delivery. I have a feeling he's going to be very interested in how his top salesman conducts business. I hung up and leaned back against the workbench. Marina thought she'd destroyed me tonight. She thought she'd won. She had no idea that I'd been 3 steps ahead of her for months. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. I woke up at 5 a.m., same as always. For a moment, lying there in bed, I almost forgot what had happened. Almost reached over to Marina's side of the bed to see if she wanted coffee. Almost started planning my day around her schedule, her needs, her wants. Then reality crashed back in, and I remembered I was alone, humiliated, and free. The freedom part was new. For 18 years, every decision had been filtered through Marina's approval. Where we lived, how we spent money, what we did on weekends, who we socialized with, all of it had been subject to her veto. I'd gotten so used to checking with her first that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just decide something for myself. This morning, I decided to go to Murphy's Diner instead of making coffee at home. I decided to wear my good jeans instead of the work clothes Marina always complained about. I decided to take the long way through town instead of the direct route. Small rebellions, but they felt enormous. Murphy's was busy for a Tuesday morning. The usual crowd of retirees, shift workers, and people who had nowhere else to be clustered around the counter and filled the worn vinyl booths. I'd been coming here for years, but always rushed, always aware that Marina was waiting at home with a list of things that needed doing. Today, I took my time. Eli! Murphy himself waved me over to the counter. He was a big man, 70 years old, and still working the grill every morning at 5. Heard you had some excitement last night. The diner went quiet. Not obviously quiet. People kept eating, kept talking, but I could feel the attention shift my way. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the first public appearance after my very public humiliation. You could say that, I replied, settling onto a stool. Coffee? Please. And Murphy? Make it a double. I have a feeling it's going to be a long day. He poured the coffee and leaned across the counter, lowering his voice. For what it's worth, I never liked that wife of yours. Too fancy for her own good. You're better off without her. Thanks, Murphy. Course, that Travis Kellerman's a piece of work, too. Sold my nephew a house last year, told him it was a great investment, didn't mention the foundation problems, or the fact that the neighborhood's going to hell. Kid lost his shirt when he tried to sell 6 months later. I sipped my coffee and filed that information away. Is that so? Oh yeah, Travis is smooth, I'll give him that. But he's slick like oil on water, looks good on the surface, but there's nothing underneath. Other voices joined the conversation. Apparently everyone in Millbrook had an opinion about my situation, and most of them wanted to share it. Marina always acted like she was too good for this town, said Betty from the corner booth. Remember when she tried to get the town council to ban the 4th of July fireworks because they were too loud and unsophisticated? And Travis, added Joe from the counter. That boy's been trading on his looks and his daddy's money since high school. Never done an honest day's work in his life. I listened to it all, drinking my coffee and eating Murphy's excellent pancakes. These people were trying to be supportive, trying to make me feel better about my wife running off with the local golden boy. But underneath their sympathy, I could hear the real message. Poor Eli. Never saw it coming. Should have known better. They pitied me. And pity, I was discovering, felt worse than anger. My phone, the cracked one from last night, buzzed with a text from Danny. Packages delivered. Check your email for confirmation photos. This should be an interesting morning for Mr. Kellerman. I smiled into my coffee cup. You seem pretty calm for a guy whose wife just ran off, observed Murphy. Do I? I finished my pancakes and left a 20 on the counter. Maybe I'm just getting started. I drove to work at Morrison's Auto Restoration, the shop I'd inherited from my father and built into the best classic car operation in 3 counties. My employees were already there, Tommy, my head mechanic, and Jake, the kid I'd been training for the past year. They looked up when I walked in, their expressions carefully neutral. Morning, boss, Tommy said. You okay? Never better. What's on the schedule today? They exchanged glances. Clearly they'd heard about last night's drama, but they were too polite or too scared to bring it up directly. The Mustang convertible needs the transmission work finished, Jake said, and Mrs. Henderson wants an estimate on her husband's Camaro. Good. Let's get to work. I threw myself into the Mustang project, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of mechanical work. There's something therapeutic about fixing engines. Everything has a purpose. Every problem has a solution. Every broken part can be replaced or repaired. Unlike marriages, apparently. Around 10 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marina's number. Hello, Marina. Eli. Her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. I'm at work. This can't wait. Travis got some very disturbing packages this morning. Photos, financial records, private information. Did you hire someone to spy on us? I set down my wrench and smiled. I hired someone to investigate my wife's affair, yes. Seemed like the responsible thing to do. You had no right. I had every right. You're still my wife, Marina. Those joint bank accounts you've been using to pay for your hotel rooms with Travis? I'm on those accounts too. That credit card you used to buy him presents? My name's on it. So yes, I had every right to document how you were spending our money on your boyfriend. Silence on the other end. Then, you bastard. Interesting choice of words coming from someone who cheated on her husband for 6 months. I want those photos back. All of them. I'm sure you do. Unfortunately, I don't have them anymore. See, once I gave them to the investigator, they became his property. And he has this policy about sharing information with interested parties. Travis's boss at Century 21, for instance. The local real estate licensing board. The Better Business Bureau. Eli, you can't. I can, and I did. Actions have consequences, Marina. You taught me that. I hung up and went back to work on the Mustang. The transmission was coming together beautifully. Smooth, powerful, ready to perform exactly as designed. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Eli Morrison? Yes. This is Brad Stevens, Travis Kellerman's boss at Century 21. I think we need to talk. About what? About the documentation you provided regarding Travis's personal conduct. And some financial irregularities we've discovered in his client accounts. I set down my tools. Financial irregularities? It appears Travis has been using company resources for personal expenses, hotel rooms, restaurant bills, gifts, all charged to client development accounts. We're talking about potential embezzlement here. This was better than I'd hoped. I'd given Danny photos and bank records showing Marina's affair, expecting to embarrass Travis and maybe cost him some business. I hadn't expected to uncover actual criminal activity. I see, I said carefully. Mr. Morrison, I want you to know that Century 21 takes this very seriously. Travis has been suspended pending a full investigation. If charges are filed, we'll cooperate completely with law enforcement. I appreciate that, Mr. Stevens. And Mr. Morrison? I'm sorry about your situation. No one deserves what you've been through. After he hung up, I stood in my garage, surrounded by the tools and projects that had been my refuge for so many years. But today, they felt different. Today, they felt like weapons. I walked to my filing cabinet and pulled out another folder, this one containing information I'd gathered not about Marina's affair, but about her business. Marina's interior design firm was small but successful, built on her reputation for sophistication and attention to detail. What her clients didn't know was that many of her original designs were actually based on my sketches and ideas, concepts I'd developed years ago when I dreamed of being an architect instead of a mechanic. I'd never minded sharing my ideas with her. I'd been proud to contribute to her success, happy to see her dreams come true even when mine had been set aside. But now? Now those sketches and designs were evidence of intellectual property theft. And Marina's biggest client, the Riverside Resort Development Project, was built almost entirely on concepts I'd created. I picked up my phone and dialed another number. Riverside Resort, Jennifer speaking. Hi, Jennifer. This is Eli Morrison. I need to speak with the project manager about some design copyright issues. One moment, please. As I waited on hold, I looked around my garage with new eyes. This wasn't just my sanctuary anymore. This was my headquarters. My base of operations for the war that Marina had started, but I was going to finish. She thought she'd destroyed me last night. She thought she'd broken me, humiliated me, left me with nothing. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. 3 weeks after the anniversary disaster, I was a different man. Not broken, not bitter, focused. I'd spent years being reactive, letting Marina and her moods dictate the rhythm of our household. Now I was setting the pace. The first phase of my campaign had exceeded expectations. Travis Kellerman was facing embezzlement charges and had lost his real estate license. Marina's affair had cost him his career, his reputation, and most of his savings in legal fees. The golden boy wasn't looking so golden anymore, but that was just the beginning. I'd been documenting everything, building a comprehensive case not just against Marina's infidelity, but against the network of lies and manipulations that had made it possible. And the deeper I dug, the more interesting things became. Take Nina Castellano, Marina's best friend and business partner. Nina had been the maid of honor at our wedding, Jess's godmother, a fixture in our lives for nearly 2 decades. She was also, I'd discovered, the architect of my destruction. It started with phone records. Marina wasn't smart about operational security. She'd used our shared phone plan for everything, including calls to Travis. But buried in those records were patterns that didn't make sense. Calls to Nina immediately before and after every meeting with Travis. Calls to Nina from Travis's number. Calls between Nina and people I didn't recognize, always brief, always at odd hours. So I'd asked Danny to dig deeper into Nina's background, and what he found was illuminating. 5 years ago, Nina had been the office manager at my auto restoration shop. She'd been good at the job, organized, efficient, personable with customers. She'd also been stealing from me. Small amounts at first, skimming cash payments and padding expense reports. When I'd finally caught her, I'd fired her immediately and threatened to press charges if she didn't pay back what she'd stolen. She'd repaid the money and disappeared from my life, or so I'd thought. What I hadn't realized was that she'd been nursing a grudge ever since, waiting for an opportunity to get revenge. When Marina started feeling neglected and unappreciated, a process Nina had actively encouraged, she'd been there to suggest that Marina deserved better. When Marina met Travis at a client event, Nina had been there to facilitate their first private meeting. When Marina needed alibis for her hotel visits, Nina had provided them. Nina hadn't just enabled Marina's affair, she'd orchestrated it. Armed with this knowledge, I'd begun phase 2 of my operation. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. If Nina wanted to destroy my marriage, I'd let her succeed. But I'd make sure she paid a price for her victory. I started by targeting their business partnership. Marina's interior design firm was successful, but it was built on a foundation of client relationships that Nina had cultivated through years of networking and social manipulation. What would happen, I wondered, if those clients discovered that their trusted designer was a fraud? The Riverside Resort project was the perfect test case. Marina had been hired to design the interiors for a luxury hotel and conference center, the biggest contract of her career, worth nearly $500,000. The designs she'd submitted were beautiful, sophisticated, and completely stolen from sketches I'd made years earlier. I'd kept copies of everything, of course. Dated sketches, preliminary drawings, even photographs of models I'd built to test design concepts. All of it predated Marina's involvement in the Riverside project by several years. The resort's project manager, David Chen, was a reasonable man who appreciated creative integrity. When I showed him the evidence of design theft, he was appropriately outraged. "These are definitely your original concepts," he said, comparing my sketches to Marina's submitted designs. "The similarities are too extensive to be coincidental." "I'm not looking for money," I told him. "I just think you should know who you're really dealing with." "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Mr. Morrison. We'll be reviewing our contract with Mrs. Morrison's firm immediately." Within a week, Marina had lost the Riverside contract, but more importantly, word of the design theft had spread through the local business community. Other clients began asking questions, reviewing their own projects, wondering what else Marina might have stolen. Her business didn't collapse overnight, but it began to bleed clients steadily. And with each lost contract, the pressure on her partnership with Nina increased. I monitored their situation through carefully placed sources: a bartender at their favorite restaurant, a receptionist at their office building, mutual acquaintances who didn't realize they were feeding me information. Marina and Nina were fighting constantly now, each blaming the other for their declining fortunes. The stress was showing on both of them. But the real masterstroke came when I discovered Nina's secret. She was married, had been for 3 years, to a man named Robert who worked in Boston and traveled frequently for business. Nina had never mentioned her marriage to anyone in Millbrook, preferring to maintain her image as a sophisticated single woman. She'd been living a double life, spending weekends with her husband in Boston while playing the role of Marina's devoted best friend during the week. More interesting still, Robert had no idea about Nina's involvement in Marina's affair. He thought his wife was a successful businesswoman with a thriving interior design practice. He didn't know about the failing business, the stolen designs, or the fact that his wife had spent months facilitating adultery. I sent Robert an anonymous package containing photographs of Nina with Marina and Travis, along with documentation of the business problems and a detailed timeline of the affair. I included a note: "Your wife has been living a lie. I thought you deserved to know the truth." The results were immediate and devastating. Robert confronted Nina, who tried to lie her way out of the situation. When that failed, she blamed Marina for everything, claiming she'd been manipulated and used. The marriage imploded spectacularly, with Robert filing for divorce and demanding half of Nina's business assets. Suddenly, Nina was facing financial ruin and personal humiliation, and she was facing it alone because Marina, never one to stand by a sinking ship, had already begun distancing herself from her former best friend. The partnership dissolved in a flurry of lawsuits and recriminations. Marina kept the business name and the remaining clients. Nina was left with nothing but legal bills and a reputation in tatters. But I wasn't done with either of them. Marina had moved in with Travis after his legal troubles began, thinking she could help him through his crisis. What she hadn't anticipated was how quickly a man's character reveals itself under pressure. Travis, facing the loss of his career and potential jail time, had become bitter, controlling, and occasionally violent. The charming man who'd swept her off her feet had turned into someone she barely recognized. I knew this because Jess had started talking to me again, not because she'd forgiven me, but because she was worried about her mother. Marina had stopped returning her calls, had missed their regular lunch dates, had become increasingly isolated and defensive. "She looks terrible, Dad," Jess told me during one of our awkward coffee meetings. "She's lost weight, she's always nervous, and she has this bruise on her arm that she says is from bumping into a door." "Are you worried about her safety?" "I don't know, maybe. Travis gives me the creeps now. He's always watching her, always asking where she's going and who she's talking to. It's like he doesn't trust her." "Ironic," I said. "Dad." "Sorry. Do you want me to talk to her?" Jess considered this. "Would you? If you think it would help." But when I called Marina, she refused to see me. When I showed up at Travis's condo, she wouldn't come to the door. She was trapped in a situation of her own making, and she was too proud or too scared to ask for help. That's when I decided to accelerate my timeline. The annual Millbrook Summer Festival was coming up, a weekend-long celebration that brought the whole town together for food, music, and community events. Marina and Travis would be there, along with everyone else who mattered in our small social ecosystem. It would be the perfect venue for the final act of my revenge. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, gathering the last pieces of evidence I needed, preparing my presentation, making sure every detail was perfect. Because this wasn't just about exposing Marina's affair or Nina's manipulation. This was about reclaiming my place in this community, about showing everyone who'd pitied me that I was nobody's victim. I was the author of this story, and I was going to write the ending. The Millbrook Summer Festival transformed our sleepy town into something magical. Main Street was closed to traffic, lined with booths selling everything from handmade crafts to funnel cakes. The old bandstand in the town square hosted local musicians, while families spread blankets on the grass and kids ran around with balloons and cotton candy. I'd been coming to this festival for 43 years. As a child with my parents, as a teenager trying to impress girls, as a young husband showing off my beautiful wife, as a father watching my daughter perform in the school choir. This festival was woven into the fabric of my life, connected to every important memory I had of this place. Today, it was going to be the stage for my final performance. I arrived early, dressed in my best clothes and carrying a leather portfolio that contained the culmination of months of investigation and planning. I'd reserved a booth ostensibly to display some of my woodworking projects, but the real purpose was to establish a base of operations in the heart of the festival. The morning passed pleasantly. I sold a few carved jewelry boxes, chatted with neighbors, played the role of the recovering husband who was getting his life back together. People were kind but cautious, unsure how to interact with me after the very public destruction of my marriage. Around noon, I spotted Marina and Travis entering the festival grounds. She looked thin and nervous, constantly checking her phone and glancing around like she expected trouble. He looked angry and possessive, keeping one hand on her arm and steering her through the crowd like she was his property. They were both about to discover that trouble had indeed found them. At 2:00, the festival's main event began, the annual charity auction where local businesses donated goods and services to raise money for the town's youth programs. It was always well attended, with most of the town's prominent citizens bidding on everything from dinner packages to vacation rentals. I'd made a special donation to this year's auction, a complete home office renovation, including custom furniture and interior design services. The auctioneer announced it as a generous gift from local craftsman Eli Morrison, and I stood to acknowledge the polite applause. What the audience didn't know was that this donation came with a presentation. "Before we auction this package," I said, stepping up to the microphone, "I'd like to tell you a little bit about the craftsmanship and design work that goes into a project like this." The crowd settled in for what they assumed would be a brief sales pitch. The auctioneer looked slightly annoyed. This wasn't part of the usual program, but he didn't want to be rude to a major donor. I opened my portfolio and pulled out a series of large photographs mounted on poster board. The first showed my workshop, with examples of my furniture and design work displayed prominently. "I've been working with wood for 25 years, I began, creating original designs that combine traditional craftsmanship with modern aesthetics. Each piece is unique, built to last, and represents hours of careful planning and execution." I held up the second photograph, a detailed drawing of a living room interior, complete with custom furniture and decorative elements. This design, for example, took me 3 weeks to develop. Every line, every proportion, every detail was carefully considered. It's the kind of work that defines an artist's signature style. I could see Marina in the crowd now, her face pale and confused. She was probably wondering why her ex-husband was giving a lecture on interior design at the town festival. "Of course," I continued, "the real tragedy in any creative field is plagiarism. When someone steals an artist's work and presents it as their own, they're not just committing theft, they're destroying the trust that makes artistic collaboration possible." I held up the third photograph, which showed Marina's submission for the Riverside Resort project alongside my original sketches. The similarities were unmistakable. "This is my original design from 2019, I said, pointing to my sketches. "And this is a project submitted by Marina Morrison Interior Design in 2023. As you can see, the similarities are extensive." A murmur went through the crowd. People were starting to understand that this wasn't a sales presentation. "Now, I want to be clear," I continued. "Intellectual property theft is a serious matter, but it's not the only form of theft that's been affecting our community recently." I pulled out another set of photographs, these showing Travis and Marina together at various hotels and restaurants, along with copies of credit card statements and expense reports. Travis Kellerman, formerly of Century 21 Real Estate, used company funds to finance an extramarital affair with my wife. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, gifts, all charged to client development accounts. The total amount embezzled was over $15,000. Travis started pushing through the crowd toward the stage, his face red with anger. "You son of a bitch!" "But the most interesting discovery," I said, raising my voice over his shouts, "was the role played by Nina Castellano in orchestrating this entire situation." I held up a final set of documents, phone records, financial statements and photographs showing Nina's secret marriage and double life. Nina, who many of you know as Marina's business partner, has been living a lie for years. She's been married to a man in Boston while pretending to be single here in Millbrook. She's been using her position in Marina's business to embezzle money and manipulate clients. And most significantly, she orchestrated Marina's affair as revenge for being fired from my business 5 years ago for theft. The crowd was completely silent now, absorbing the magnitude of what I was revealing. I could see Nina near the back, trying to slip away unnoticed. "The really tragic part," I said, "is that Marina was just a pawn in Nina's revenge scheme. She thought she was finding true love, but she was actually being manipulated by someone she trusted." Travis had reached the stage now, his fists clenched. "Get down from there, you pathetic loser." I looked down at him calmly. "Travis, you're facing embezzlement charges and you've lost your career. Your relationship with Marina is falling apart because you can't handle the pressure. You have no money, no prospects, and no future in this town. Who exactly is the loser here? He lunged for the stage, but Sam Murphy and a couple of other men grabbed him and held him back. The crowd was buzzing with excitement now, phones out, recording everything. I turned back to the microphone for my closing statement. I know many of you have been feeling sorry for me over the past few weeks, I said. Poor Eli, whose wife ran off with a younger man. Poor Eli, who never saw it coming. But I want you to understand something. I've been 3 steps ahead of this situation from the beginning. Every move they made, I documented. Every lie they told, I investigated. Every crime they committed, I exposed. I gestured toward Marina, who was standing frozen in the middle of the crowd, tears streaming down her face. Marina, you thought you were trading up when you left me for Travis. You thought you were escaping to a better life. But look around you. Your business is failing, your lover is facing jail time, your best friend betrayed you, and your daughter is ashamed of what you've become. Was it worth it? The crowd was completely captivated now. This was better than any soap opera, and it was happening live in their own town square. As for the charity auction, I said, I'm withdrawing my donation. Instead, I'm making a cash contribution of $25,000 to the youth programs. Money I've earned through honest work, unlike some people in this community. I pulled out a check I'd prepared earlier and handed it to the stunned auctioneer. And one final announcement, I said. I'm putting my house on Elm Street up for sale. Open house next Sunday, everyone's invited. It's time for me to start fresh somewhere new, somewhere I won't be constantly reminded of the lies and betrayal that defined my marriage. I gathered up my photographs and stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted to let me through, their faces showing a mixture of shock, admiration, and entertainment. I'd given them the show of a lifetime. As I walked toward the exit, I passed Marina one last time. She reached out to touch my arm. Eli, please! I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved for 18 years, who'd shared my bed and raised my child and promised to stand by me through everything. She looked broken now, defeated, nothing like the confident woman who'd walked out of Romano's 3 weeks ago. Marina, I said quietly, I want you to remember this moment. Remember how it feels to have your life destroyed in public, to have everyone you know learn the truth about who you really are. Remember it, because this is what you did to me. The only difference is, I deserved better. I walked away, leaving her standing there in the ruins of her reputation, her relationship, and her future. Behind me, I could hear the crowd erupting in conversation, phones ringing as people called friends and family to share the news, the festival continuing around the crater I'd just created in the center of my former life. I got in my car and drove home to pack. Tomorrow, I would start looking for a new place to live, a new town where nobody knew my story. But tonight, I would sit in my garage workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that had sustained me through the worst period of my life, and I would plan my next chapter. I had won, completely, decisively, devastatingly. And it felt exactly as good as I'd thought it would, 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 thought it would.